My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 31. And I've spent the last 9 years feeding strangers at the best tables in Dallas. Private dinners for oil executives. Charity galas for senators' wives. A rehearsal dinner for a Cowboys quarterback that ended up in Texas Monthly. I own a catering company called Bennett Table. And when people book me, they're not just paying for food. They're paying for the kind of evening they'll brag about for years. But nothing in my kitchen. Not a collapsed soufflé. Not a walk-in that died on Christmas Eve. Nothing prepared me for the Sunday afternoon. My own mother sent me this text. Honey, we think it's best if you skip Thanksgiving this year. Grandma gets confused when you're around. And we don't want to upset her. 2 minutes later, my father added, Your brother is bringing Avery's family, and we need it to feel calm. You understand. I was standing in my test kitchen with a thermometer in a pot of cranberry reduction. And I read those 2 messages 4 times before the smell of scorched sugar pulled me back. Grandma gets confused when you're around. My grandmother, who called me her little spoon since I was 4. Who taught me how to butter a turkey with my whole hand. Who asked for me every single Sunday. Grandma didn't get confused when I was around. Grandma lit up. And they both knew it. My thumbs moved before my brain caught up. So you picked Avery's family over your own mother's, I typed. The little red receipt flicked on. Then off. Then nothing. Fine. They wanted a soft-lit Thanksgiving table that looked good on my brother's girlfriend's Instagram. They wanted Avery Whitfield's parents, who owned half the commercial real estate in Highland Park, to see the Bennetts as polished, calm, restrained. They wanted me, the loud sister in chef's whites with flour on her forearms and a business that required a 1099, to disappear. What they forgot, what my parents always forgot, is that every bite of every Thanksgiving they'd served for the last 6 years had come out of my kitchen. The dry brine turkey from a farm in Bastrop, the cornbread dressing with oyster mushrooms my grandmother loved, the bourbon pecan pie that my brother always claimed credit for. Every piece of that meal sat on my commercial account, on my vendor contracts, in my walk-in refrigerator. If I wasn't welcome at the table, my food wasn't welcome either. I set the thermometer down, wiped my hands, and opened my laptop. What I did in the next 90 minutes, my family still hasn't fully processed. Before I tell you how my mother ended up crying into a Papa John's box at 8 p.m. on Thanksgiving night, and what my grandmother said when she finally figured out the truth, I want to hear from you. What time is it where you are right now? And what city are you listening from? I want to see how far this little Dallas disaster travels tonight. If you'd stood at the edge of our family photo 10 years ago, you would have thought the Bennetts were a picture-perfect North Texas household. My father, a regional sales manager for a farm equipment company, built his whole identity around looking successful without actually being rich. My mother ran the neighborhood HOA like it was Congress and treated her Facebook page like a society column. My brother Nolan was the golden boy. Eagle Scout. UT Austin Business School. A consulting job that nobody could quite explain, but always sounded impressive in a Christmas letter. And then there was me, Claire, the daughter who went to culinary school instead of law school, who moved home at 23 with student loans and a dented Honda Civic, who worked 3 jobs while building a catering company from the trunk of that same Civic. I built that company alone. My parents didn't lend me $1. What they did do was volunteer me. Nolan's engagement party at the country club, Claire will cater it. Dad's retirement breakfast, Claire will handle the pastries. Mom's garden club spring luncheon for 40 women who sip Chardonnay and judge each other's china, Claire will bring a full menu at cost. Because family discount. Honey. I never sent them a single invoice. I made a habit of telling myself that feeding the people you love is its own reward. That's a thing I read in a cookbook once. And I repeated it to myself so many times, it started to feel true. The first real crack came 3 years ago. When Bennett Table catered a fundraiser for a pediatric hospital and ended up in D Magazine's food issue, my photo was on page 42. Small but clear. Next to a sidebar about Dallas's young women to watch. I mailed a copy to my parents with a post-it on the cover. My mother called that night. "Oh, honey. That's so sweet they included you," she said. "We showed Grandma. She asked if you were on TV." "Mom, it's a magazine." "Well, she gets them mixed up. A pause. Claire. While I have you. Nolan and Avery are getting serious. Her parents want to host a dinner. Would you do something elegant? Just family rates." Of course. Family rates. I dropped $3,000 on that dinner. Imported burrata. A lamb dish that required 2 days of prep. Hand-pulled pasta for the main course. When Avery's mother, Elaine Whitfield, asked at the end of the night who the caterer was, my mother smiled and said, "Oh, we have a girl we use. She's local. A girl we use." I was standing 10 feet away in my chef's coat. I drove home that night in a kind of silence that isn't really silence. It's the hum of a person deciding how much longer they're going to pretend. I decided to pretend for longer. That was my mistake. Over the next 2 years, the Whitfields became a kind of weather system in my family. Every conversation tilted toward them. Elaine says. Hunter thinks. Avery mentioned. Nolan proposed to Avery on a rooftop in Austin last spring. And I found out through a tagged photo on Instagram. My tripod was in the background. My mother had asked to borrow it 3 weeks earlier. Just for a little project. She'd said. I shipped it from Dallas. When I saw the photo, I zoomed in twice. Just to be sure. There it was. Mi tripod. Holding someone else's camera. Capturing a moment I wasn't invited to. I told myself families were messy. I told myself my grandmother was 84 and wouldn't be around forever, and I wasn't going to spend whatever time she had left picking fights. So I showed up. I catered the engagement brunch. I did a rehearsal dinner tasting for the wedding they were already planning. I brought my grandmother homemade biscuits every Sunday, and she held my hand and said, "You're the one who checks on me." Spoon. Don't think I don't know. Then came the Sunday text. Grandma gets confused when you're around. We don't want to upset her. I sat at my kitchen island for a long time after reading it. The cranberry reduction cooled on the stove. Somewhere in my chest. A door that had been squeaking for years, finally closed. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was something colder than that. I was clear. My brain slid into the same mode it slips into when a bride's dress rips 20 minutes before vows. Or a grill dies during a 100-person rehearsal. Calm. Focused. Professional. I opened the Bennett Table vendor portal. Every year. I placed the Thanksgiving order for my parents through my business account. Because it was easier, and because my suppliers gave me contract pricing no civilian could touch. The heritage turkey from Eastside Farm. 26 pounds. Already paid for under my LLC. The oyster mushrooms, from a guy in Denton, who only sold to licensed chefs. 40 pounds of russet and sweet potatoes. Pecans from a grove outside Fredericksburg. 6 bottles of the specific off-dry Riesling. My mother liked to serve, but refused to order herself because she didn't know wine. I picked up the phone and called Marcus at Eastside Farm. Hey. It's Claire. Quick favor. The turkey I reserved for the 27th. I need to redirect it. I've got a client in Plano doing a 40-person sit-down, and they lost their bird. Can you reassign the reservation under my account? Marcus laughed. Your mom gonna be mad. My mom isn't paying for it. Marcus. I am. Always have been. Copy that. Done. Next. My produce guy. Then the wine distributor. Then the pastry supplier I used for pie shells. Each call took 4 minutes. Each one ended with a reassignment to a paying client I'd already been working with. A small private Thanksgiving I'd been quietly declining because my family always came first. I called the client. An oil executive's wife in Plano who'd begged me to cater her in-laws' dinner. And I told her I'd changed my mind. I could do it. Full menu. My full team. Tableside service. She cried on the phone. By 5 p.m. Every piece of food that was supposed to land at my parents' address on Thanksgiving Day was now promised to someone who said thank you. I'd made one final arrangement too. Something I didn't admit to myself until I was typing it into my calendar. At 7 p.m. on Thanksgiving, I was going to be 1 block away from my parents' house, plating a completely different Thanksgiving at my neighbor Joyce's home. Joyce was an 80-year-old widow my grandmother had known since church choir in 1972. Joyce had called me 2 weeks earlier, asking if I'd help her host her great-grandkids. I'd said yes on instinct. Now it felt like fate. I typed one last message into our family group chat. I won't be handling the Thanksgiving food this year. Please make arrangements for yourselves. I hope Avery's family has a beautiful time. I hit send, and I turned my phone face down, and I poured myself a glass of the Riesling I'd already paid for, and I sat on my back patio until the streetlights came on. For the first time in a long time. The quiet didn't feel like punishment. It felt like a room I owned. The next 3 days were a slow detonation. My mother called twice on Monday. I let it go to voicemail. On Tuesday morning, she left a message that opened with, Claire, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, and closed with, you're being dramatic, and you know it. On Tuesday afternoon, she called Eastside Farm directly, using my father's credit card, and was informed that the turkey was no longer available, and that the farm was sold out through December. She called me again. This time the message said, your father and I are very disappointed. We expected better from you. My father, who had not spoken to me directly in 6 weeks because he'd been busy golfing with Hunter Whitfield, texted on Tuesday night. This is petty. Claire, Grandma's going to ask about the food. What do we tell her? Tell her the truth. I thought. Tell her that her granddaughter was disinvited, so you could impress a family that wouldn't cross the street to pick you up if your car broke down. I didn't send that. I just turned the phone over. Nolan called at 11 p.m. on Wednesday. He's the sibling I've always found hardest to hate, because he isn't cruel. Just absent. He's the kind of brother who remembers your birthday 2 weeks late and always blames his calendar. Claire, he said. His voice was tired. What is happening? Mom is losing her mind. Avery's parents are coming, and we have nothing to serve. You have a grocery store. Nolan. It's Thanksgiving Eve. Then you have a freezer aisle and a prayer. I paused. When did Mom tell you I wasn't coming? Silence. A long one. She said you had a work thing. He finally said. I don't have a work thing. She disinvited me. She told me Grandma gets confused when I'm around. Which is a lie. And you know it's a lie. More silence. I could hear a dishwasher running somewhere in his apartment. I didn't know that part. He said quietly. I'll talk to her. Don't bother. Just come over to Grandma on Friday morning. I'm taking her to breakfast. I hung up first. On Wednesday night at 11:30. A delivery driver rang my doorbell. A long white box and an envelope. Inside the box, white peonies in November. An absurdity that must have cost $300 from some specialty florist my mother used for HOA events. The card read, in her loopy schoolteacher handwriting, Claire baby. This has spiraled out of control, and your father and I both feel you've made your point. Please fix the food situation before tomorrow, so we can have a peaceful day. We will talk about everything after the holiday. Love. Mom. The envelope contained a personal check for $250 I had spent, over the last 6 years, somewhere north of $14,000, feeding their holiday tables. The check was, I realized, almost exactly what one Whitfield dinner had cost me in 2022. I put the peonies in the trash. I kept one stem in a mason jar on my counter because I am, apparently, a woman who still allows herself small, beautiful things. I shredded the check. Thanksgiving morning, I woke up at 5 a.m. My team of 4 showed up at 6. We loaded the vans with the food that used to be my family's dinner and drove it to Plano, where I plated an absolutely beautiful meal for 12 grateful people who tipped my staff in cash and hugged me at the door. By 3 p.m., we were back in Dallas, unloading what was left. Resetting for Joyce's small family gathering 4 blocks from my parents' house. At 4 p.m., my grandmother called me. Her voice was shaky, the way it gets when her blood sugar is off. Spoon, where are you? I'm at your mother's house. There's no turkey. My heart stopped for one long second. Grandma. What did Mom tell you about me? She said you were sick. Are you sick? I closed my eyes. I was standing in Joyce's kitchen, an apron tied around my waist, a meat thermometer in my back pocket. I'm not sick. Grandma. Mom asked me not to come this year. She said you'd be upset if I was there. There was a silence on the line. And then my grandmother, 84 years old, and sharper than anyone in that house, wanted to admit, said one word. What, I'll come get you. I said, give me 15 minutes. I took my apron off. I told Joyce I'd be back in 40. I drove the 4 blocks to my parents' house. And I pulled into the driveway behind 2 cars I didn't recognize. A silver Range Rover with a University Park parking sticker. A black BMW with dealer plates. The Whitfields had arrived. The front door was unlocked. I walked in. The dining room had been set like a magazine spread. My mother's good china. The linen napkins. The silver candlesticks that had belonged to my great-grandmother. What sat on the table was, I swear to you, a Papa John's spinach, Alfredo pizza. A box of Popeye's chicken. A tub of mashed potatoes from a grocery store deli. And a pecan pie still in its plastic clamshell. My mother, in her best navy dress. They was pouring sparkling cider into wine glasses, like that was going to fix anything. Hunter Whitfield sat at the head of the table, confused. Elaine Whitfield wore an expression I'd spent years watching her deploy against waiters and valets. Avery was on her phone. Nolan was pale. My father was somewhere in the kitchen, pretending to be busy. My grandmother saw me first. She was in the corner chair, swimming in a cardigan that used to fit her. And her entire face changed. Spoon, she said. Babe. What is going on in this house, Grandma? I came to take you out for dinner. The room went quiet. My mother looked at me with an expression I will remember for a long time. Not embarrassment. Rage. Like I'd broken a vase on purpose. Claire. We are in the middle of something, she said. Her voice pitched for company. This isn't appropriate. Neither is lying to an 84-year-old woman about why her granddaughter isn't here. I said, I wasn't loud. I didn't need to be. Elaine Whitfield's eyes sharpened. Lying. My mother laughed. The brittle laugh she uses when she's cornered. It's a family matter. It's a family matter that landed Papa John's on your Thanksgiving table. Hunter Whitfield said. Dry as a bone. I was going to ask. Mom told Claire to skip because of me. Nolan said suddenly. I looked at my brother. He was looking at his plate. Because she didn't want Claire to. I don't know. Embarrass us in front of the Whitfields. Nolan. My mother's voice was a knife. No. He finally looked up. No. Mom. I've been sitting here for an hour trying to figure out how this happened. And I'm done. Claire owns a catering company. She's been in D magazine. She feeds this family every single holiday. You told me she had a work thing. It is a work thing. My mother said. She canceled her commitment to this family. Her commitment, I said. The word was so ugly, I almost laughed. Mom. For 6 years you have eaten food I paid for with my business. Every turkey. Every pie. Every bottle of wine on that sideboard. Until this year. Came out of my vendor account at family cost. I didn't cancel a commitment. I stopped subsidizing a table I'm not allowed to sit at. Elaine Whitfield slowly set down her glass. You paid for all of this in previous years. Yes. Mom. Under my LLC. Bennett Table. That's my company. I pulled out my phone. Opened my vendor log from the previous Thanksgiving. And turned it to her. That's what last year's meal cost me wholesale. Retail it would have been almost double. She read the screen. Her mouth made a small, sharp shape. Diane. She said to my mother. You told me at the engagement party that you employed a caterer. I do. My mother said weakly. Claire is the caterer. It's a family business. It is not a family business. I said. It's my business. You are my mother. Those are different things. Hunter Whitfield started to laugh. It wasn't a kind laugh. It wasn't a mean laugh either. It was the laugh of a man who has just realized the whole afternoon was a performance and he'd been cast as an audience member. Diane. He said. I think we're going to head home. I'm glad we met your daughter. Mother. Avery finally looked up from her phone. Why is there Popeyes? My grandmother stood up. It took her a moment. But she stood. She had one hand on the table to steady herself, and she looked at my mother with eyes that had seen a lot of nonsense in 84 years and were not going to tolerate this particular flavor. Diane Ellen Bennett. She said. You told me my granddaughter did not come today because Claire upsets me. Is that true? My mother's face crumpled. She didn't answer. Claire has never upset me a day in her life. My grandmother's voice shook but held. Claire calls me every Sunday. Claire brings me biscuits. Claire sat with me when I got my hip replaced. And I don't remember you doing that. Diane. I remember Claire. So you will tell me right now. In front of these people. Why you lied. My mother started to cry. Not the pretty kind. The ugly kind. Where your mascara goes, and your voice pitches up, and you become a child again, in front of your own child. Because Avery's family is important to Nolan. She sobbed. And Claire is. Claire is a lot. She's loud, and she talks about her business, and she doesn't understand that some things are about appearances. Appearances. My grandmother repeated. She looked at me. She looked at the Papa John's box. She looked at her daughter. And then she said, softer. You've turned into your father. Diane. I'm sorry about that. Then she turned to me and said, spoon. Take me home with you. I don't want to eat here. I took her coat off the back of the chair. Nolan stood up and said he was coming. Avery, to her credit, stood up with him. The Whitfields were already gathering their things. My father had not come out of the kitchen, and did not come out while we left. We walked out through the front door. I drove my grandmother 4 blocks to Joyce's house, where a turkey I had brined for 48 hours was resting under foil on the counter, where my team was setting out a Thanksgiving dinner for 12 that I had built with my own hands. Joyce opened the door, and my grandmother's face, which had been tight with confusion and hurt for the whole ride, finally relaxed. "Oh, Martha, you look thin," Joyce said to my grandmother. "Sit down." Claire made stuffing. My grandmother sat. I put a plate in front of her. I sat beside her with my own plate for the first time in a decade of cooking for other people's holidays. And I ate my own food. And I watched my grandmother eat 2 helpings of everything. Nolan showed up 40 minutes later with Avery. He stood in the doorway of Joyce's kitchen looking like a man who had aged 5 years since lunch. "Can we sit down?" he said. I made them plates. Avery was quiet for most of the meal. At one point she leaned over and said, "Claire, I want you to know that I never asked your mother to exclude you. I didn't know. I'm horrified." I believed her. She was 27, and in love with a man whose family was messier than she'd realized. And she was going to have to figure out what to do with that information for the rest of her life. Nolan waited until after pie. He asked if we could step outside. Joyce's porch looked out over a little magnolia tree my grandmother had planted for her in 1988. "I didn't know she told Grandma you were sick," Nolan said. "I didn't know she told you Grandma got confused around you. I knew she was weird about tonight. And I didn't push it. I'm sorry. Claire." "Okay. That's it. Okay. I'm tired." "Nolan." I leaned on the porch rail. "I've been tired for years. I don't need a speech. I just need you to. If we're going to have a relationship going forward, I need you to stop being the brother who finds out later. Start being the brother who asks questions when something feels wrong." "Okay." He nodded like he was taking notes. "Okay. I can do that. And I'm not catering your wedding." He laughed. Short. And a little broken. "Avery's mom already said she wants to hire you. At full rate." She was mortified. "I'm still not doing it. Pick somebody else. I'll send you 3 names." He nodded again. We stood there for a while. Eventually, he said, "Mom's going to lose her mind over this for months. She's going to lose her mind until she goes to therapy." I said, "That's on her. I'm done managing it." My father called me 3 days later. It was the first time I'd heard his voice in almost 2 months. He wanted to know when I was planning to apologize to my mother. I told him I wasn't. I told him that if he wanted to have a relationship with me, he'd need to work out why the phrase "grandma gets confused around you" ever left his wife's fingertips. And he'd need to do that work without me in the room. He told me I was being cruel. I told him I was being clear. He hung up on me. My mother sent me a long email at Christmas. I read the first paragraph. It was a list of everything she'd done for me as a child. I closed it without reading the rest. I did not block her. I just stopped answering. My grandmother moved in with me in January. It was her idea. She said the house was too quiet and the food was worse since Claire quit feeding them. She said it with a little smile. And I laughed for the first time in weeks. On a Sunday morning in February, I was making biscuits for her. And she reached over and patted my hand. "Spoon," she said. "You did the right thing. You know that, don't you?" "Most of the time I know it." I said, "Your mother," she said slowly. Was raised by a man who taught her the only thing worse than being poor was looking poor. I did my best, and I still got it wrong. You broke the chain. Baby. You broke it loud, and you broke it in front of company. And I am not sorry about it. I couldn't speak for a minute. She went back to her coffee. I'll tell you the part I'm still figuring out. I don't hate my mother. I don't even hate my father. I just don't trust them. And trust isn't something you get back with a check and a bouquet. It's something you get back in small, honest moments over years. And I don't know if my parents have the stomach for that kind of work. Maybe they will. Maybe they won't. I'm not sitting in the passenger seat of that car anymore. Bennett Table had its best quarter ever this spring. I hired 2 new sous chefs. Elaine Whitfield, of all people, referred 3 clients to me. Avery and Nolan got married in May at a venue I did not cater. I sent them a beautiful casserole dish and a handwritten note. They were kind notes. We'll see. So here's the thing I wanted to ask you. And I mean it. Where would you have drawn the line? Would you have swallowed the text about Grandma and shown up with the turkey anyway? Telling yourself it was easier than the fight? Or would you have done what I did? And let the Papa John's box land on the table like evidence? There's no clean answer. I know women who stayed. And they're tired. I know women who left. And they're lonely. I know women like me, who pulled the food off the table and built a different table 4 blocks away. And we're somewhere in between. Not healed. Not broken. Just clearer. The lesson I keep coming back to isn't about revenge. It's about who you're willing to feed. For most of my life, I fed people who didn't see me. And I called it love. And I was wrong. Love is feeding the people who pull out a chair for you. Love is an 84-year-old woman eating 2 helpings of your stuffing and telling you you broke the chain. Everything else is just catering.